Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. We're going to get started on our final day for the end of the year spending around 8A companies in particular, how to get some of that money. And today we'll be talking about how do you hear about those opportunities. Before we go too much further, I just wanted to ask some of you who are in here early. You're coming early all the time, and I really appreciate that. And I want to double down, frankly, over the weekend. Just come back and look at the comments in the chat, etc. And I want to know you even better, so I can put you on this list of companies that if I hear about something, I let you know. So in the chat, make sure you just obviously tell me about your core competency, 2 or 3 words, right? No big write-up, just 2 or 3 words on your core competency, like workforce development. If you put that into the chat, I'm really going to remember. And then also tell me if you're 8A, HubZone, SDVO, or woman-owned small business, so that I've got those tracking on your company name. The last thing is I just want to give everybody a tip. When you come to trainings like this that are live, especially on LinkedIn, where it's a whole networking platform, imagine you're at a conference and you have the opportunity to be able to hold up a sign that just says, hey, this is the name of my company, right? Just so everybody goes, oh, GovCon Chamber, right? I see them. And if I see them enough times, I'm going to begin to go, well, who are they? Let me go learn more, right? Put your company name, your LinkedIn link to your company page. If you don't know how to do this, if I'm doing the GovCon Chamber, I would put at GovCon Chamber. And as I'm putting at, it should display the name. Might be a little different depending on whether you use a mobile or desktop. It certainly is not going to work if you're on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter coming into us. But if you're in LinkedIn, make sure you put in your company name in a way that it's tagged back to your LinkedIn company page that enables us to follow you through in there. Okay, so let's get rocking and rolling on today's training. Let me just get my screen lined up here. Okay, we should be good to go. Let me get to my slides. Today, we're going to be talking about, again, the best way to hear about opportunities as it gets to the end of the year, right? In particular, I'm talking to 8A firms. There's a lot of activity that happens in the fourth quarter, but this training is focused really specifically on 8A firms because there's such a big potential for you. But whatever I teach during the training, the tips are valuable to any business, and even larges, right? Who I'm not training, but small businesses, any small business, you can follow the tips that I provide. It's just a lot easier if you have direct award 8A set aside. Okay, so the first thing I just want to reiterate here, if you haven't heard me say this before, is that end of the year spending is a definite reality, right? It's unrealistic to have no experience, no past performance, no real focus on core competency, and think you're going to get a piece of the end of the year spending that happens. But if you do have a good core competency and you've got past performances within the federal market, then to have a plan around trying to get some of the end of the year spending that is, I call it sporadic or spastic even, that's around the 8A direct awards, that's a realistic expectation. Just look at some of the numbers I'm putting here, right? 50% of the dollars that are awarded direct award or sole source to 8A firms, 50% of it happens in the fourth quarter. That's next month, July, August, and September. 50% represents $4.2 billion in direct awards for last year. That's huge. And there's only 5,000 8A firms, right? When you really think about that, the potential to get in there is huge. And by the way, don't use the ANC excuse and all this other stuff. I get it, but don't let excuses stop you from realizing that you should be able to get a piece of the end of the year spending if you've got those procurement ready stats that I just said. Another way to look at the end of the year spending is 67% of 8A sole sourcing or spending, in this case, it's 8A sole source task orders that are done. 67% of them are done at the end of the year. So maybe a lot smaller, a lot more opportunities, but maybe smaller in size, which means potentially more 8A firms can get a part of it. But in 2022, out of 16,000 sole source opportunities or contracts that were awarded in 2022, 10,000 of them were done in the fourth quarter. That tells me a lot, and it should tell you a lot. But even though I'm telling you these fantastic stats, right, I like sharing data and evidence as a way to get you to see the reality of the situation. It is important to keep in mind, you're not going to do this alone, right? You're going to need help from people. And I'm going to talk today about how you can get help. But go into this knowing that you're going to need to work with other people. In fact, team up with other 8As to try to go after things. Maybe they hear about an opportunity, but they're in acquisition support and they hear about a cyber opportunity. or vice versa, right? Help each other out. Maybe they're construction and they hear about an IT project. Help each other out. You should have 20 or 30 8A friends that you're working together saying, hey, if you hear anything and you don't do it, let us know. And then that goes with my last part of that is, why should you work alone, right? You're not going to be able to do it alone, but why should you? Even if you could do it alone, why should you? You're only giving yourself a piece of the success you could have because you're helping just with yourself. But if you've got friends out there who are watching out for you the same way you would watch out for them, then you're going to have much more success. This last bullet I put just for the opening here is that subscription services are not going to help you with end of the year spending as it relates to direct awards or 8A sole sources. And the reason I say this is because these subscription services are just, they're helpful for year-round sales activity, right? I like the subscription services for what their purpose is, but end of the year spending that goes to direct award to sole source tends to happen a lot faster, right? That type of end of the year spending for 8A direct award is much different than the end of the year spending that happens for the rest of us. For the rest of us, it typically is something we've had in the pipeline in the government's mind for the last year or 6 to 12 months. They've seen it at the beginning of the fiscal year, but they didn't have money, and they get to the end and they buy it. That's different than what I'm talking about today. Today is about end of the year spending that didn't have a whole lot of thinking around it. They're just looking for qualified vendors, and I want you to be where they're looking. So today's training, I'm going to cover down on 3 things I want to share with you. And each of these, I'm going to give you a tactical tip to move forward. So the first thing is just which people can you talk to learn about opportunities, especially direct award opportunities for 8As. Second thing is going broader, right? Which organizations might you reach out to and be in front of so that you can hear about these opportunities? And the last one is what tools, what systems are out there that you could be browsing and accessing so that you can learn about opportunities. So there's 3 ways I'm going to teach you: people, organizations, and tools. We're going to cover down on those. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. Process goes A to Z. When you follow the process, you're going to have repeatable, predictable results, and that's what I want for you. Part of the process, right, for this training and for visibility and marketing of your company is to tell me who you are. Help buyers remember who you are. So in the chat or in the comments, if you're watching the replay, put your company name and the core competency. Only use 2 or 3 words. I see people sometimes put paragraphs in there, and I'm not knocking you for it. I'm just telling you I'm not reading it. I don't have the time. The other day we had like 200-300 comments or something, and I'm trying to go through it, and I really want to see them when I get there. But if I see a paragraph, I almost just give it a thumbs up, move on. But if I see something smaller, it sinks into my head. And so that's why I'm saying 2 or 3 words. That's the patience level market researchers have and buyers and your teammates to remember. We begin to learn more and more once we get used to it. So make sure you do that. If you're open to connecting with people on LinkedIn, connect with them. If you're in my training, I'm definitely going to reach out and connect with you. Okay, let's talk about people who will tell you about opportunities, and especially about opportunities that are potential sole source or direct award to 8A firms at the end of the year in this last quarter. There's a handful of them that I've listed here, and I've listed them kind of in the order of value to you, right? So the most important thing you got to keep in mind, if you're trying to go after end of the year spending, target an agency. Don't just try to target every agency because you're not going to have that much impact. But if you target a particular agency, let's say the Army, I was just talking to a potential customer this morning saying you got to zero it down. And the Army looks like a spot for them, which is good because the Army spends a lot on 8A direct award at the end of the year. If you have an agency, it makes everything else easier. So coming through the agency level people that you could hear about opportunities, the number one is the contracting officer. If you don't know this, and there are people who don't know this, this is why I'm saying this. If you don't know this, the contracting officer is what I call the focus of power. They have the power to award you a contract or not, right? They sign the contract. No one else but the contracting officer does this. Contracting officers can sign bigger and smaller contracts, but it's always a contract officer. And so they're the ones you're going to hear about direct award type opportunities the most from, because they've got a stack of requirements, and that stack gets crazier and crazier the closer to September it gets to, and the closer to September 30th it gets to. And they've got a stack of contract or requirements that they're trying to get off the table. They're trying to find qualified vendors who can help their customers with the mission, right? And so the KO is how we call them in the Department of Defense, and CO is where we call it everywhere else. By the way, if you don't know why, it's because KO and CO stands for contract officer, but in the military, CO stands for commanding officer. So we call them KOs. Second one, contract specialists. These are basically contracting officers without the power to sign, right? They work side by side with the contracting officers. They're often on a team. You might see bigger contracts have 3, 4, 5 people on a team. It might be a couple of contract officers, a couple of contract specialists. The contract specialists, and I say this loosely, this is my first time testing this out, so tell me if you like it. The contract specialists are kind of like the enlisted of the acquisition workforce, and the contracting officers are the officer grade. So in the military, we have officers and enlisted, and it just occurred to me that maybe that's how it is. The contract specialists are doing most of the work, and the contract officers getting all the credit. Not that you can tell that I'm a bitter enlisted guy. Okay, so the third one is the small business professional. So the KO and the contract specialists are the ones who are dealing with the opportunity. They're dealing with the acquisition and paperwork, et cetera. The small business professional is the one who's trying to advocate for small business use within an agency and trying to help internal customers within the agency find qualified small businesses that can support the mission need of the agency. And so there's two main titles you want to pay attention to. By the way, I am not talking about the OSDBU. Stay away from the OSDBU. There's some friendly ones out there, but that's not the point. Their job is leadership and policy. They're not touching the contract themselves, but often a small business professional specialist is working with contracting officers to help find and use small businesses in there. And it doesn't mean don't talk to an OSDBU, but just don't think an OSDBU is going to have a lot of knowledge about the opportunities. Usually they're busy with policy and working the whole department or whole agency. So in the civilian side, they typically are called small business specialists. And in the defense side, they're called deputy small business directors or deputy director of small business. You can find their different titles within our small business specialist directory. It's a directory of 1,000 small business specialists within the federal government. If you're trying to find names, numbers, and emails, that's the directory you want. Go to our website to download it, www.govconchamber.com. But anyways, you'll see the different titles depending on the agency. So the fourth one within an agency of 4 groups of people you could talk to and hear about potential end of the year spending is the head of contracting activity. I just put them in. I feel like too many people don't know about the head of contracting activity or don't even try to reach out. But there's nothing wrong with reaching out, especially if you're a proven vendor, right? Even a proven vendor within their agency, of course you could do that. Reach out, ask for some time, set up a call for an introduction meeting. And when I'm saying an introduction meeting, really it should be 10 to 15 minutes. Anything more than that is just, it's unnecessary, right? You just want to get on their radar. You're not trying to convince them of anything, but really the head of contracting activity, these HCAs, they're a great group of people to potentially reach out to. If you're already doing several $1 million worth of business within an agency and you're looking at, doing more, let them know who you are. Let them know that you're doing good work. They often run into contracting folks in their shop. They have meetings talking about, hey, what's on your plate? What's on your plate? To the contracting officers. And so that's a good group of people to talk to. All right, coming down the list. So that was in an agency. Other people you can talk to who are outside an agency who could be aware of these end of the year spending activities. They could be aware of contracting officers looking for a small business like yours. They're in the SBA. So one is the procurement center. Oh, it's the procurement center representative. I'll come back to that in a second. One thing I really want to stress, if you're not aware of how business works in the government contracting world, understand what I'm about to tell you. The SBA exists to help basically small businesses succeed across the country. There's 30 million plus small businesses. And so the SBA works on all of them, not just government contracting. A small group within the SBA supports government contracting needs, et cetera. And one of the groups within the GovCon world within SBA is responsible for the success of 8A firms. They have a budget of over $60 million to support the success of 8A small businesses. Frankly, I personally believe they should divvy up the $60 million among all you 8As every year and just give it to you and let you go hire consultants. but they do spend it, right? And they spend it on a lot of people who are there to support you. And you want to reach out and take advantage of this. It's like having paying taxes and not taking advantage of the things that you get for those taxes, national parks or education or whatever, right? There's these things you're already paying for. You might as well get advantage of them. And so there's two people within the SBA I want you to pay attention to, build relationships with. I've done tons of training on how to reach out to these people and talk. But the first one is the Procurement Center Representative. We call them PCRs. PCRs have oversight responsibility over agencies like the agency you might try to work with. And so whenever an opportunity is looking to go full and open, the agency has to get buy-off by the PCR. The reason this is important for you to have a relationship with a PCR who has oversight over your target agency is because that PCR knows all those contracting officers, right? Maybe you're not trying to convince them to take something full and open, make it small, but what if the contracting officers are like, hey, John, the PCR, do you happen to know any 8A firms that do this, right? And so you want to have them know who you are. And that's about building a relationship. The next group is the business opportunity specialist. Any 8A firm knows who they are. And so you want to take full advantage of the relationship. A business opportunity specialist, their job is to kind of help industry succeed in the different ways they can. But their primary responsibility is helping 8A firms first be compliant with whatever they have to be compliant with, and then engaging with potential buyers as they're identifying them. The tip I want to give you as it relates to business opportunity specialists is there's a lot of them, not just yours. So throughout the year, but certainly in the next couple of months, you can reach out to a couple that maybe are near the agency you want to get into. So an example is if I'm trying to get into somewhere in DC, then I can look and see who that business opportunity specialist is. And I can reach out. Can I have a 10-minute call just to introduce ourselves? I know I'm not in your area, but can I introduce myself? You should make them work for you, not in any kind of bad way, right? But if they don't know who you are, how could they ever bring you up? They don't just exclusively work with the people in their area of responsibility. They are committed to helping all small businesses succeed. Their main responsibility is their regional area. But if they know who you are, if you're able to get some traction, they're a fantastic person to potentially hear about end of the year spending. So you see the tip here. This is what I want you to do when you think about the people who could tell you about opportunities. Establish a regular follow-up period with them. It only needs to be 5 minutes. So an example is, let's say a contracting specialist or a small business professional. Do you mind if I touch base with you every couple of weeks just to check in, see if there's anything I can do to help? Do you mind if I just follow back up? If you get on the phone and you have a quick meeting with them, getting the follow-up, it's hard for anybody to sit there and go, no, don't follow up with me, right? It's rare that that's going to happen. But if you've got somebody you've established a relationship with, just get a commitment from them that it's okay for you to follow back up. I talk to small business professionals, contracting officers, et cetera, who have talked about working with small businesses for like a year where they just touch base, and it's like, I can't do anything. And then one day they're like, I got this perfect opportunity for Joe. Let me introduce Joe to Jane and they can talk about this opportunity. But it happens once you establish a regular clip. Too many of us just go in, have one call and go away, or come back every few months. It's hard for anybody to really know you if you're not in there on a regular basis. So let's talk about continuing with this idea of where can you learn about opportunities? Well, if the first group is people, here are some organizations I want you to pay attention to where you could hear about opportunities if you're involved in the organization. The first one is the SBA district office. I was talking about a friend of ours, customer, Nina, who's down in Florida, who talked about getting contacted by the district office because they knew each other. And a buyer reached out to the district office of the SBA and said, hey, do you know anybody? And they say, you know what, let me introduce you to Nina. Let me pass you her information. And they connected. They were able to move forward on the relationship, right? And it was because Nina knew who the district office was, and more importantly, they knew who she was. So reach out to your local district office. You can also reach out to other district offices around the country, but start with the one that's in your backyard. There's one district office that is yours, right? Based on where your headquarters is. Get in there, have them understand who you are. And I just put this little link here. You can just go to the SBA. If somebody can grab this, I can't really grab it myself at the moment, but somebody grab that and they'll drop it in the chat. But all you have to type is SBA district office into Google and you'll find it. But when you come in, you'll see all the contact information for every district office, right? You just come in, click on it. and you start drilling down and you'll find their information, point of contact, et cetera. And there's a lot of people, right? These people are some of the best people. And right here, the phone directory, every one of them has a PDF that lists out who's in that office. Okay, PTACs, these are a great group, right? They're called something else now, but PTACs are around the country, and they're often building their own relationships with agencies that are in their world. So Oklahoma PTAC, I think Tinker Air Force Base is out there. They have a relationship several times a year. They're coming together, organizing industry outreach events, et cetera. So when Tinker is looking for a small business, maybe especially looking for a small business that's in there in Oklahoma, they're going to reach out to the PTAC and say, hey, do you know anybody? Right? They have the relationship. So that's a great place to be able to establish a relationship where you're able to hear about opportunities. It's okay to reach out all across the country, by the way, to the other PTACs. Don't spam them. But if you're looking for Joint Base San Antonio, you can reach down to San Antonio PTACs or Texas PTACs. There's several of them. Reach down there and see if you can establish a relationship. Going with that whole idea, organizations, there's a lot of organizations all around the country focused on different areas of the federal government. So they're out on the outside, right? One example that I love, and Lee Christian heads up a lot of the activity that happens in there, but the Catalyst Center in Huntsville, Alabama. These people have solid relationships with the agencies that are down there. And if you don't know this, Alabama and Huntsville area has got a huge federal presence. And so building a relationship with the Catalyst Center and getting in there and knowing them is a great way to hear about opportunities, especially if they know who you are. They're able to put two and two together. The same reason I said at the beginning of this, make sure you put your core competency into the chat for me so I begin to learn about it, but don't put too many words because I won't read it. And then the last group of people I just want to tell you about is where you can hear about end of the year opportunities are teaming partners, right? There's all sorts of teaming partners. You can have small business teaming partners where it's a much smaller environment. I used this example earlier, an 8A firm that is already out there doing something, but they don't do what you do. They could hear about an opportunity and throw it to you. The biggest success I got was in my last business, and I'll never forget this. This guy, Ted Fells with Nucor Vision, is the guy I give thanks to for this stepping off success I had in my last company in the federal market, because I reached out, I built a relationship with him. He didn't do SharePoint, but he's in with the agencies, and he goes, yeah, sure. I don't do it. I hear about that. Next time I hear about it, I'll throw it to you. And then we teamed up for a couple, and then I was able to start priming. It works like that, right? Build these relationships, but also with large primes. If you're larger, if you're a large or small, you got experience that you can build a relationship with a large, right? Don't just reach out brand new. But if you can build a relationship with them, they hear about opportunities they want, but they know it's 8A, and they might bring it back to you and just let you know, hey, I heard about this. I heard about this. This happens all the time. It's called networking, right? It's why we do networking. Here's my tip for this one, though, reaching out to organizations, is make sure the leadership knows about you, right? Don't just like look in and get out. District office, right? Make sure that you're an example of a way that you could get engaged in your district office is they do multiple events. Actually, let me use Lee, because I know she does this. She does training every single week. Just put it on your radar, right? There's so many people who come to my training. I know who they are. They've made sure leadership knows who they are. And some of them I'm making referrals and introductions. Some of them I even made referrals for them to get facility clearance top secret level. You know how hard that is, but I did that just for an introduction because I was able to. It's the same thing with these organizations. Make sure the leadership knows, not just maybe a counselor, but the district officer, whoever. And when they know about you, they begin to remember you. That's the biggest thing, right? And so my tip is consider volunteering, like a Catalyst Center around the country where there's these networking events. Don't just show up. Consider volunteering. Now you're at the top of the list of people I might remember to make a referral. The last thing I wanted to share as it relates to how you can hear about opportunities for direct award 8A sole source at the end of the year. There's a lot of tools that you can use out there, and none of them are the subscription ones. I already mentioned in the beginning, subscriptions are not good for the end of the year direct award spending that happens with 8As. And the reason they're not good is because they happen too fast, right? And so those tools aren't really able to keep up with it. Those tools are good for the whole long year-long sales cycle, et cetera. So the first place that you can look at is contract vehicles. This is huge, right? If you're an 8A Stars 3, you should be looking at that contract vehicle at least once a day. No less than once a day, you should be looking at it. You pop in, you sort it by date posted, you're able to see it and get out. Do any of those look? And so you can hear about these end of the year stuff. There's going to be end of the year spending that go on contract vehicles that none of the rest of us see. They'll go out on GSA, they'll go somewhere else, and they're just moving it pretty fast. Maybe they're not necessarily sole source. They might be competitive 8A, but if they're RFIs and sources sought, then you have the potential to turn those to direct award. If no one else is responding to it, or no one really qualified is responding to it, then the government buyer considers you for that. And if you're not on vehicles that your target buyer uses, then just ask somebody who's on it. An example is the Navy. They have Seaport Next Gen. It literally is this hard. You ask Jane, can I be on the contract vehicle so I can see opportunities that are coming down? She goes, sure. She adds your name to the list. You get an email, you're done. It literally is 15 minutes or less. And by the way, if you have a contract vehicle where there's really no problem giving somebody access to the vehicle so they can see it and see the opportunities, that's a great way to build relationships. You can give something that costs absolutely nothing, but means the world to the person you gave it to. So consider doing that. So the second one is internal tools. I didn't put a link here. I should have. But there's some agencies that have their own tools that are kind of like SAM.com or SAM.gov. So about like DLA has DIBS and things like that. But those are really well-known tools. What I'm talking about is organizations like the Navy. There's one called the Naval Information Warfare Center, NAVWAR. NAVWAR has its own portal, and it was built back in the 1920s, I think. No offense. But it's a really old portal, but they still use it. And you can go in there, and sometimes they just post opportunities in there. And that's what they say often in SAM is like, if you want to see our stuff, go back to our portal. But you have to register. You have to have a user ID and to be able to get into it. So figure out from your target agency, do they have any homegrown internal tools like that where they might be dropping opportunities that you should be paying attention to? And the next one is SAM.gov, right? SAM is where most of the opportunities get posted. Not all of them, certainly none of the ones that are really on the exclusive contract vehicles, et cetera. But SAM.gov's got a ton. And you can watch that and get in there. And the reason SAM would be a great tool is because sometimes the buyers are just throwing stuff out on SAM. It's over $25,000 in value. Let me drop it on SAM, quick turnaround, sources sought, and see who's out there. Let me see if I can see any vendors. You want to know, and I talked about this the other day, you want to know what your slam dunk opportunity is. So then you can look into SAM and see if any of the sources sought or RFIs are coming out in your slam dunk area, right? Before I get to the tip, one thing I didn't say that you definitely want to be using as tools is their supplier portals. There's many agencies and most large primes have their own supplier portals. You go in there and register just like SAM and DSBS. You go in there and register your company. The reason that's a great tool to potentially hear about opportunities is NavAir, for example, has their own registration. If somebody in NavAir is looking for 8A companies for a direct award or a quick turnaround marketing activity, they go to their own tool. Make sure you're in the tools. I talked to somebody today saying it's unbelievable to me how many people have heard me say get in supplier portals, but have not stopped watching Netflix long enough to register in 100 supplier portals. Go to my website, govconchamber.com, govconchamber.com, sorry, and download. It's a free ebook right there on the homepage of 100 plus supplier portals. Go in there and register for the ones that at least are tied to your goals, because when you're registered in there, if somebody is looking for a seller like you, you make it so much easier for them to find you. And so my tip for you on this one as it relates to the tools is set up a process for you to be able to follow, like I said, with contract vehicles. Every single morning, you look at it, no fail, or every morning and every afternoon, you look at it and you get out. The other thing is tools like SAM have the ability to just set up saved searches. You identify what you want to be searching for, and then you automate it by saving that search and asking SAM.gov to send you an alert, right? There's a lot of that activity. If you're paying for subscription services, they have a lot of this as well built in. Learn how to use it. Call their help desk and say, hey, can you help me set this up before July 1st? That way you start getting alerts from the tools that you're paying for. Okay, here's what I want you to remember as you're wrapping up this training, and I know it's a fire hose worth of training. The end of the year spending is absolutely real, right? It's very real for companies that are procurement ready, meaning a solid focused offer, able to communicate what they sell, and solid past performance within the federal market. When you have that, it absolutely is real for you to be able to expect some end of the year spending activity. If you don't have that, or you have variations of it, I just can't say you can absolutely expect it, but you could certainly be aiming for it because the government spends. But it takes you doing enough of the right things the right way. I say you need to do the right thing the right way and enough of them. And if you do that, for example, registering in all 100 supplier portals, or every day looking at sam.gov to see if there's sources sought or RFIs that you want to, that fit your sweet spot, right? Doing these things are the right things, and just do enough of them and you will see the success towards the end of the year. And the last thing to keep in mind is that you're not going to do this alone, right? You've got to do it with other people. So embrace that, reach out and talk to them. Hey, one last thing. If you want to work with me, I got a BD Accelerator workshop. I am looking for 5 companies to team up with, to work with through the end of the year. I've got 25 people have already applied. But if you're interested in this and you're an 8A firm, I'd love to hear from you today as we move forward trying to make that decision. And for everybody else, remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training. Have a great weekend.